Sandeep, thanks so much for being here today. I know you're very busy at the moment with the launch of your book, and I was really fortunate yesterday to come to your book launch, which was the first I've been to, so that's something checked off the list for me. So congratulations on the launch of your new book, and really pleased to have you here today.
Thanks, Ollie. It was first for me as well, so I've checked off that list as well.
Yeah. So my understanding, I'm an avid reader, and when I have had the privilege of speaking to other authors or just listening to them online, they're all in agreement that one of the hardest things you can do is write a book. It's definitely one of the biggest undertakings one can take. So why did you decide to write a book?
So it wasn't really planned, in my case at least. I was just sitting down to record my personal journey. As honestly, I've not been into journaling. Many people have their diaries or notebooks in which they talk about their day or jot down some important milestones in their life. I don't have anything like that. And I had some personal situation last year where I found myself away from New Zealand for quite some time, basically helping my family back in India, in Mumbai. That's where I originally come from. And I took a break and I traveled to the UAE for 10 days. And I lived with my sister who stays in Abu Dhabi. And I had always been talking to her about, I really want to record some of my personal experiences because I just feel I'll forget about it. And I want to be able to reflect, sometime in the future when I'm retired as to how did life really happen? And there are some minute details which are very critical, but you tend to forget them as time goes on. So it honestly started almost like a personal journaling sort of initiative. My sister gave me this space and she said, okay, I'm giving you this bedroom with an amazing view looking out the Arabian Sea in Abu Dhabi and no one to disturb you. And we've got food, everything will be catered to you. But if you do not do it this time, then do not complain about it in the future. And that's how I started to write. And as I went about writing and recording my personal experiences, starting as a international, someone who, so I did not really go into about other aspects of my life, but only the aspect of how did New Zealand come about in my life and the international education. And so that's how the book shaped up and, turned out to be what it is today.
Yeah. We will get into the book itself and what you've written about. But to be honest with you, when you sent me the draft and we were talking about doing a chat over the podcast, it was initially difficult to find how would this relate to our audience. And, we at Unbreakable Ventures, we talk about the threat landscape first and foremost. So we're looking at emerging current threats and the adversity that people go through to manage those. And so I was thinking, how is this going to relate? This is a story about a man who's come from another country to set up a life in New Zealand, an education story, but also dealing with the difficulties of things like visas and all those sorts of challenges. And so I thought, how does this relate to our audience? But actually, when I go through almost every chapter, you talk about personal resilience quite a lot, and you talk about dealing with those challenges on a personal level. And then in hindsight, finishing the book, I'm thinking this is exactly what our audience is looking for. This is what people are looking to grow every day. So I'm really curious about, as you've gone through your educational journey, you've become a professional who's very well known in Christchurch. What sort of experiences have you seen since writing this book where it's helped not just students who are looking to come overseas, but maybe it's also helping the professional leaders that you're coming across?
So that's a very good question. Your podcast is about, emergency management systems and resilience. And I feel like there's a lot of transferable learnings out of this process. Just like how we talk about transferable skills that people use in various other jobs or professions that they might be in. Very few people understand, especially in New Zealand. So I just like to point out, pre-COVID, the international education industry in New Zealand was over $5 billion. So that's the amount of revenue that it brings into New Zealand. And that is why it sometimes becomes a controversial, or very important rather than controversial subject in New Zealand, because it directly ties in with immigration. Because although we count international education as an export of service, it does not happen with the users being offshore. The customers or the consumers of the education have to travel into New Zealand to get and receive that service. And hence the immigration comes into the picture. And a short-term skill shortages or need of certain professionals in New Zealand, and acquiring those skill sets through the pathway of education is a process that's been going on not only in New Zealand, in many developed economies around the world. And the biggest supplier of those skill sets or those students actually come from developing part of the world. And it's understandably so, because the education system is still developing. So they're looking for places where research is high quality, education systems are state of the art. In New Zealand, although we say we're at the bottom of the world, we do really, really well in terms of our universities. All our universities in the top 3% in the world. So it's not really surprising that people get to know about New Zealand when they are looking for destinations to go for international education. Having said that, the process is not straightforward. It's not like someone sitting in England decides to come to New Zealand and applies to a university, get the admissions, hops on a plane, comes here and starts their life. No, it's very different, because other countries don't have the kind of bilateral arrangement that say England would have with New Zealand, or the US would have. Developing countries still have to go through a lot of immigration background checks in terms of security. Their education system is not exactly recognized. It goes through a process of screening whereby they assess that whether what you've learned matches up to the expectations of our university or not. Whether you have the financial capability to come here, study here, support yourself. Whether you are masking yourself as an international student, but you actually don't intend to study and you want to just come here and get lost and probably seek asylum. So you see all these points that I just mentioned. What does each one of these hoops require for one to cross it at every step? Patience, determination. And if there are setbacks, which I promise there are quite a few, and it's not a unique story. I've spoken to so many students being in the profession also afterwards. And each one of them have their own hurdles that they come across in all these 5 or 6 points that I just mentioned. It takes an immense amount of resilience to go through that journey, be an international student, and arrive on the shores of New Zealand. And guess what? That's only the beginning of this journey in New Zealand. But the part one that has happened in their back home has been full of challenges, and they have overcome that just through sheer perseverance and resilience.
I think that's a fantastic answer for starters. You're touching on that patience piece, which is huge in resilience, both from a corporate and personal perspective, because, as we saw with COVID, I think a lot of people thought that would last 6 months, a year maybe, and it, dragged out for 4 years. And some would say it's still dragging out the impacts of that. So I think, that patience piece is a real important part of this story. What I've come to learn myself in the last few years, we've done a lot of work alongside University of Canterbury, which I know you're very closely affiliated with, and we've met a lot of international students. We've worked with a few. They've come and worked with us. There is something almost ingrained deep in these young adults where they're coming to New Zealand from their home. They've left their family. I mean, I met someone yesterday at your book launch who was here on his own, away from his family, from Japan, and I almost can't fathom that. I couldn't imagine leaving my family at that age to come to New Zealand, not only study, but to build a life here and ingrain yourself into the culture, and yeah, it's a remarkable thing. I'm interested to know though, from your experience before you got to New Zealand, how did you sort of test the waters? How did you know that New Zealand was going to be the place for you? Did you know that, or was there somewhere else that you had on the radar?
So no, I did not know that New Zealand is going to be the place. Honestly, if you read the book, and you have read the book, just for the context, I was quite clinical about the way I approached international education. So my inquisitiveness in the proposition of going abroad for my further education stemmed out from me catching up with a old friend of mine from high school who I hadn't met for a good 5 odd years. And we'd been great friends. We would hang out with each other for every day, right? And I meet him after 5 years. And I left with that meeting feeling quite different about our friendship and about my friend in person, not in a negative way, in a very positive way. But I could just not put a finger on it, a pinpoint what's changed. And as I reflected on that catch up over the next few days after we met, I realized that my friend's become really responsible with his life. So, just for context, again, if you are growing up in India, you mostly, people, there are lots of stereotypes around it. You will live with our parents, and it's a common feature. You live with your parents. You've got lots of help around managing your life in terms of food, cleaning, cooking. All you got to do is basically, if you're a student, study.
Right.
Everything else is taken care of. You got no lodging, boarding, things to worry about. But my friend started to talk about like, hey man, I was cooking over there because there was no cook for me to cook. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. So you know how to cook? It's like, yeah, I can actually make food. I was like, wow, can make food and eat it too. That's wonderful. Then he's like, I had to do my own washing and cleaning. I've learned how to use the Hoover, which is no rocket science, right? But if you haven't used a Hoover before, it's like, okay, I know how to operate washing machine. And while I was doing all of that, I was also studying, and I just saw he's become like he's conscious with his words. He's conscious with his time, how he's using his time, and that change in him is what inspired me. It was like, okay, these are the positive changes that a person can go through if they leave home to get education in a foreign land, in a world, in a highly recognized university, and the quality of education is what will change you for life. That was the starting point for me. And as I started to discover, I was like, okay, where do I go in this whole wide world to study, to become like my friend? He'd gone to Italy, but there was a language barrier. He'd been learning Italian for a very long time. So I was like, I want to go to a Commonwealth sort of a nation because it's easier. Like coming from India, we've got the same education system. English is, of course, a second language, but something that we are comfortable speaking. Most people are. So it's an easy it's an easy transition. And so my first step was doing a proper health check of the world, because this was, I'm talking 2014, beginning of 2014, end of 2013 when I started to do my research, and we were still recovering from the global financial crisis.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of noise about how the world is still recovering. Banks shutting in the U.S. every day, Lehman Brothers and so forth. Bloodbath, absolute. So U.S. was completely out for me for that reason. Europe was again slow because my dad works with in exports with European companies, and he kept telling me how slow things are over there. Australia has its own issues, and plus, as I say in my book, not very fond of their cricket team. Great players, but And so Canada,
Mm.
to answer your question, Canada was my first choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's well, actually, Canada has a lot of similarities to New Zealand, so I can kind of understand how that might be the alternative. The one thing I just wanted to quickly touch on is you said the words health check, and we actually have a solution we do with a lot of our clients, which is called a health check, and it's this. I guess it's the work of taking a pause and looking at where you are today, and looking at where your what the situation is around the world as well, or around your organization or your people. And what has been really positive we've seen is organizations think that they have to tick all the boxes straight away when there's crises going on in the world, whether that's geopolitical, COVID, natural disasters, etc. Obviously, there are a lot of boxes to check, but that health check piece can be so reassuring, just to kind of see where you are now and see what is out there that you're about to go up against. So can we dive a little bit more into that health check? Because you said you looked at a couple of countries. What was it about Canada then that ticked all those boxes and was seen as your healthy option at the time?
No, great question. So, as I said, the economic situation of the world post GFC was not very great. When I compared Canada versus some of the other countries that I mentioned, I saw that none of their major banks had gone bust. So that means that it had credibility in terms of its Reserve Bank policy. That was one. The second aspect was that the Canadian society, very friendly, very open, multicultural society. I could see myself fitting in there. That was the second part. Third was that the universities and institutions Canada are highly well ranked and well known around the world. So they had the institutions and the infrastructure in place for quality education, which was also equally important for me. And the last one was around immigration. I saw that the immigration policy was quite open and friendly towards international students. It's because at the time when I was doing my research, I saw stuff on their websites and the immigration websites about certain categories of visas that they had opened up, which was almost like a seamless transition from being a student to skills that the country needs. Canada also have this system, I think, just like Australia, where different states have their own policy. So if you were, if you were go to British Columbia, and you were studying a certain course, that would tie into maybe a certain immigration policy that is not available in Ontario. So I like the mix. It gave me that option. So it gave me that comfort that, I'm going to a place which is friendly and welcoming, great policies in place. The economy is not as bad, which means they're doing something correct fiscally, and the great institutions and universities, which is, again, a very important factor for any international student. So in those terms, it stood out. It probably checked all the boxes.
Yeah, right. Let's dive into that a little bit in terms of how a business might transfer that experience you've gone through to their people. I'm keen to explore how you think leaders might embed that sort of adaptability to their team, and how might a team pivot during disruption, or because you're saying here you had a plan, and we'll go into why it wasn't Canada in a minute, because you're obviously here in New Zealand and not Canada. So you might want to touch on that in your answer here, but yeah, what would you share with team members and leadership teams who are looking to try and teach their colleagues how to have that similar sort of thinking around health checks, looking at your options, planning, really putting things down on paper, having a plan B? What do we do to embed that in our culture?
So in terms of my story, I think we got to take a couple of steps back and go to something that I touched upon early. It is about motivation.
Mm.
Before going into the health check, you first need to clearly know that what's driving you towards those health check. So in terms of maybe resilience or being more prepared for situations, emergency situations, um, that's the motivation. Then you be clear about like what sort of situations are you anticipating, you know, in terms of the work that you do. I know there's you do some great work in helping out in flood situations that New Zealand has seen quite recently. What are the scenarios that you are preempting? So what's driving you to do that health check? In my case, the motivation was very clear. I really want to change my life around. You know, I want to be like my friend. Um, once that was clear, I went into doing my research. And as I said, when I was doing my research, from my motivation, I knew that in order for me to be successful and a more responsible person, I would need an environment in which those sort of qualities can prosper. I can harness that. Uh, one thing I've realized, and I've met a lot of people, professionals, young students, even mature students, people who are wanting to be students or go back to study, is that you have a certain skill and a quality that is put in an environment which doesn't need those. You're the same person, you will not be able to prosper because your environment is not conducive to your skill sets, and that comes in many ways. It could be just the economic downturn, it could be the geopolitical situation of the place, it could be the bureaucracy of the place. You take that same person with those skill sets and plant them into a different environment, and suddenly they start thriving.
Mm.
So sometimes you got to be aware that I have those things in me, and I need to recognize that through my motivation. I need to align my research once I have gone through those realizations, and my checkbox list will 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 be prepared according to those understanding and realizations. Once I had those realizations, I then made these five list of these five things in my checkbox. The place has to have a good and robust economic policy and structure in place. I I love the idea of capitalism, but it shouldn't go too far when people can go and bust your banks. You know, so it should be monitored. Uh, the place should the place that I choose should be a place where people are supportive, welcoming, friendly, looking at similarities rather than differences. We can't really avoid it; it's everywhere in the world. But what is the major part of the population? Just like in New Zealand, we look for similarities. We see how can we win together. The third aspect was, of course, what the purpose that I'm going for. I need education. I need to download the best possible research that's available in this world, cutting edge. So these became part of my checklist. So leaders who are out there in any industry who want to prepare those checklists or to tell their team how to think about resilience, I would say it has to start with something which is more deeper. Could sound generic, but what's our motivation?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can prepare all the checklists, but if it doesn't really align with what are we trying to solve, what are we looking at, what are those unprecedented or preempted scenarios that we are going to solve look like, we won't get the checklist right. And trust me, any checklist, as you know from my story, is not a perfect checklist. Things change, right? So I'll probably dive into the second part of your question as to how my checklist changed.
Mm.
I just spoke about my motivation, guiding my research, and then me having this amazing checklist after doing hours of research, narrowing on to Canada, having the amazing policies, welcoming policies, etc., etc. When I applied to a university there, got my admissions, um, and then went on to apply for a student visa, my visa was rejected. So here's a place that I thought is welcoming. The policies are clear, need more students with the skill sets to fill the gap in the country, has rejected me. And that was so disappointing, so disappointing. Personally, for me, as a person, I felt being accused of a crime that I have not done. I'm innocent, but I have been labeled as someone who is not fit for that job. So the immigration letter came back saying, um, as per clause so and so, section so and so of our immigration policy XYZ, after 15 lines, the last two lines said that we do not think that you are a bona fide student to come to Canada, and we don't think that you will leave after finishing your studies in Canada. So the expectations of any immigration policy around the world, including New Zealand, is that you're an international person. You coming to our country to get a quality education that's not available in your country. We welcome that, but we expect you to return to your home country and take that knowledge and apply it over there. But we also have kept doors open for you to contribute to our own country, but that has to happen naturally. It should not be forced. It should be organic, right? So that's like the unspoken. But for me to be told that we don't want to give you that opportunity because we have a certain sitting over here reading few documents, that you're not a bona fide student. And that for me was a major, major setback. It's, you know, you being in a emergency situation where uh, there's waterlogging and there's floods, and you find your house surrounded by water, no electricity, no clean water, no access to food, something that your company deals in solving, right? I feel the emotion that you go through then uh, is 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 different from a level of threat perception, because you fear for your life also. But the sadness and the frustration and the anger that I went through was very similar to what people find themselves in these situations when you're being told that, hey, you're not a genuine person.
I think it's also the fact that you've put all that work in to get yourself to Canada, to do your research, your preparation. You had a mission there, and it's been ripped out from underneath you, just
Absolutely.
without any real reasons or
And I paid,
justification.
you know what's the funny part is, I paid the entire tuition fee in advance. In advance. It's lying, it's in their bank account
Yeah.
in the, institutions. But it happens. It happens all the time, as I learn in months and years after that, that sometimes there are certain process in place when you go through immigration, hurdles. You have to go through certain specialized people who
Yep.
know how to present your case. That's also an important thing that people should know. So there's a process that's involved, but definitely from where at that point of time where I felt quite disappointed.
I want to touch on something you mentioned a little while ago when you were explaining your journey to Canada, or not to Canada. And you mentioned about people being in the right environment to, maybe it's their skill set or where they can thrive. And we've known each other for a little while now, and everyone I seem to meet in Christchurch knows you, and you are certainly thriving here in Christchurch and New Zealand. And in this day and age of AI, with tens of thousands of redundancies from businesses who are making, hundreds, tens of billions. There's a lot of uncertainty around the future, particularly for young adults. I'm meeting a lot of UC students, for example, who are really concerned about what they're going to do after they graduate. And one conversation I'm having, which resonates with this be in the right environment, is around not necessarily just going out and trying to find a job because you need a job after you've graduated, but actually doing the work to put yourself in the right place that fits who you are as an individual. And, that doesn't always relate to what you studied. It can relate to who you are as an individual. It can relate to what you're passionate about. And then hopefully your career, it connects to that. I guess what I'm keen to understand though is you've come to New Zealand, and I guess we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I really want to touch on that environmental piece around the individual. You've come to New Zealand, you've put yourself in a situation that requires you to step up and utilize who you are as an individual, your own competencies to be successful here. What's your advice for young adults today who are about to go through that journey, not just in New Zealand, but anywhere? They're dealing with this threat of AI taking, entry-level jobs. They're dealing with too many people looking for jobs who have already got experience. I mean, it seems almost pointless. It's a bad time. So what do they do about this? How do they take that on?
Starting with the environment piece. Back home, we, while we were students, while I was in my high school, after that as well, there was one acronym that was going around quite a bit. That's SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
SWOT is short for strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And all this while, I was mapping out what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, opportunities and threats. What I realized that often there was emphasis by my teachers, professors, peers to identify your weakness and work hard on it so that you get better and more stronger. When this is, I think I have not mentioned it in my book, but here's one for your audience.
Great.
In the first week of my class here in Christchurch, I was going through a leadership course. Chris Hansen, is a Christchurch-based consultant in leadership and runs a successful program called the Leadership Lab.
Mm-hmm.
He was my professor. And I actually wrote these very words on the board, SWOT, S-W-O-T. And then he wiped out W and T, weaknesses and threats. And he said, just focus on your strength, and that'll lead to the opportunity. Because often we are focusing on our weakness. So someone tells you need to be more hardworking, very generic statement. And you're just like, how can I work more hard? How can I work more hard? How can I be more diligent? How can I be more good with my time management? How can I be consistent and persistent? This is something that you hear over and over again. And that was a light bulb moment for me. And I'm talking about environment again. Same classroom environment in a different country, in front of a professor who's done cutting edge research, saying the same thing but in a different way, right? And at that moment when I saw strength and opportunities, SO, on the board, I developed an analogy myself, and I'll delve into it for your viewers who understand cricket, right? Because coming from India, cricket has to be on our analogies. We are either on front foot, back foot, whatever. There is a famous cricketer in India who was one of the greatest cricketers in India, my favorite, who has always also been the cricket captain of the Indian team. His name is Sourav Ganguly. Saurav Ganguly has one of the best stats as a player and as a captain. He was a left-hand batsman, um, and the world knew that Saurav Ganguly has a weakness, and that's his leg side. Which means if the bowler bowls the ball on his leg side, most of the time they would end up beating him, or he would flick it and someone in the slips would catch the ball. And there was a time in his career where where I think the noise got so loud, everyone from the fielder to the bowler, to the commentator, to an average person walking on the street was like his leg side is weak. So he spent a lot of time probably strengthening that, but eventually he gave up. You know why? Because his offside was so bloody strong that no player in the world has ever had that strong of an offside. And he only focused on his offside. To heck with it. You bowl 6 balls, doesn't matter how great a bowler you are. If you are bowling on the leg side and it's slightly off and he moves, the ball goes wide, which means you get a run, right? So you will bowl either on the middle or offside. If you bowl on the middle or offside, you're bound to go to the boundary if Saurav Ganguly is on the crease. And that was the analogy that stuck with me. And I was like, you know what? From today, to heck with my weakness and threats. I'm not going to focus. I'm going to take my strength to that level where my weakness becomes so small, so minuscule that it doesn't matter at all, just like Saurav Ganguly's. So 1 or 2 wickets on the leg side, fine. But a century on the offside, bowl a ball, and that changed my thinking. So my suggestions, my advice that I offer to anybody, any budding student, young student, professionals, often we get caught up in perfecting ourselves in our weakness because that's the easiest place to spot. We have to find our strength, and we have to only and only focus on our strength and keep working on it. I don't care if you wake up after midday. I don't care if you're all up night as a student. I don't care if you watch how many YouTubes and you just not, you know, don't feel guilty about it. Find your strength and keep working on that strength, because you know what? If you keep working on your strong points, your weaknesses wouldn't matter. I'm not saying that, go really hard on your weakness, but find that strong point of yours and keep working on it. Absolutely. And um, and that will lead to those opportunities that every student is looking for, also in this age of AI. Yes, AI is the new thing. It's developing, and it's developing really fast. It is scary. I get scared as well, but it will present opportunities that never existed before. We've seen this in when the internet came about. We've seen when people were threatened about the postal services going off. Uber came and taxis would never exist. Emails taken over, and then the SaaS happened. It's just the world has evolved. A lot of things have happened. Crypto has happened.
Yeah.
So use your education. You are in an institute which is at the front end of this cutting edge research, even in AI, how to adapt with AI, learn, work with it. AI is here to stay.
Yeah.
It's our friend. It'll work with us.
Yeah.
But don't forget your own strength just because you're threatened by AI's strength.
That's a good point, actually. I've never thought about, passing that message on to a student is this is a grand opportunity for them to be the generation that grew up with AI as opposed to being replaced by AI. This is, you spend 5 minutes on LinkedIn and you see a lot of, quote, AI experts these days who seem to have come out of the woodwork, and that's fine. But as the younger generation seems to be more technically driven, this is an opportunity for them. So, yeah, it's a really interesting take. I want to talk about that piece you were saying around Well, let me take a step back, actually. An example from our perspective is we were running a scenario exercise a few weeks ago overseas, actually. And we had a room full of senior leaders, executives, CEO, all that sort of stuff. So it was a pretty good turnout, important exercise for this company. And what tends to happen is when you're running the exercising or the validation of a crisis response team who is often made up of C-suite in some respects, those C-suite members can be put in those positions because of their title and responsibilities, less so their skills to be in that position. A real good example of this is, you've seen probably some shockers with the CEO doing a press release or speaking to the media and botching it big time. And you think, why is this person even standing in front of camera? And what we experienced in this particular exercise was there were some particularly junior individuals who were really good at putting together statements for social media. There was another girl who's really good at just managing fire wardens, and she took she took that leadership position to speak up and manage them. But they weren't necessarily their original tasks or roles that they'd been set in the plans, which is why we validate and we test, so we can go back to them and say, hey, it was really good, or this wasn't great. But by the way, you've got two people here who could thrive during an event like this, and you need to get them into those positions. And actually you find that the CEO isn't the right person, and you end up having someone maybe in mid-management step up because they've got that confidence, good communication skills, etc. So you're kind of talking about that a little bit in terms of particularly young adults. They might have something in them that they don't realize is super valuable to an organization that they would expect usually gets looked after by someone in senior management. But we're maybe AI is twisting that a little bit now, where everyone can have a voice. They have an opportunity to speak up because there's so much disruptive movement going on in the corporate world. So I just wanted to kind of follow on from that, because I thought that was a really relevant, timely point. Is not everyone is often in the positions they should be in, and that maybe is because, as you're saying, they're not looking at really where their strengths are and following opportunities. Again, going back to your book launch yesterday, I was speaking to a couple of people about, particularly the student I spoke to. One of the key things nowadays is to meet people, right? We're in a very digital economy, and there's this, everything's behind a screen. And I've really personally found so much value out of just getting in front of people, human to human interaction. And I know you are especially, I would say, an expert in that. I know you've, anyone who follows you online will see you standing next to the Prime Minister, for example, and meeting some really amazing, experienced people. So I want to kind of maybe move on to that a little bit. And let's get to the part in your book now where you've gotten to New Zealand. You've got your visa in New Zealand. You talk about decision ready, and I really liked what you wrote about exploring the market as such, right? And you've gotten advice from professionals, but you've taken that with a grain of salt a little bit. You've still got your own decision-making frameworks as well. So maybe you could walk us through, you've talked about that disruption from Canada, which is, that's a kicker, but we're all grateful you chose New Zealand in the end. So how did you get to New Zealand? When you got here, what were the biggest challenges you were kind of going through, and how do you think you got through those once you've landed?
So when my visa got rejected from Canada, I was, as I told you, I was very disappointed. That disappointment turned into anger. And that anger turned into a bit of a vengeance. And so I applied again.
To Canada.
To Canada. It was an appeal. So you can appeal. And while that appeal process was going on, I met someone from Canada, an alumni of the institute that I was applying to. And that person, in a conversation with him, asking him questions about Canada, he told me that, do you have a plan B, by the way? I said, no, don't have a plan B. I don't believe in plan B. Why should I? It's like, I've done so much of hard work. I've got my checklist now, and I've found that perfect place. Now I don't need to really, because, I had this thing that plan B leads to you not giving your best 100% to your plan A at times. But I was wrong. One should always have a plan B. Now, that guy really pushed me towards going in, meeting few people that had helped him with his admission process to Canada. However, when I went to meet this person, that guy heard my entire story, looked at my profile, and the guy just smiled back and said, "What are you doing next week, Sunday? I want you to come to this conference or seminar." And I was like, "Here you go." I was like, "I'm really not keen." The guy was like, "You should, you should." And and I surely landed there on Sunday on that seminar, and that was basically a international education fair um, um, organized by that gentleman's company for New Zealand universities. That was my first encounter with New Zealand universities over there. I ended up speaking to three universities there. I spoke to Massey, I spoke to Waikato, and then finally the University of Canterbury. Um, Fast forward, because I don't want to get too much into the chapters of the book. It'll be too much for this podcast. Fast forward, in 3 weeks, I actually had offers from three universities from New Zealand and a rejection letter back from the Canadian
The second time.
immigration for the second time, you know. But things developed really positively with New Zealand. But I hadn't forgotten my lessons from Canada. And that's where I went this time. I was much, much well prepared. I went into reasoning and questioning as to what really went wrong, what was not probably presented in my profile or my case, which led to that decision, maybe. And I worked with this new person who was guiding me um, um, to prepare my file. It's a well-known company based in India. It's called GB Education, and they taught me how to prepare a decision-ready file. A decision-ready file is basically something that is prepared by a professional through years of experience of being in the in immigration, certified basically license holders who can help you apply for immigration services. New Zealand also awards that, whereby a person who is an immigration officer, they exactly know what are the checklists, how do they assess your application. If it's presented in the right way, all the information is there. It doesn't take much time for them to either say yeah or nay, basically. And we prepared a decision-ready file where my entire case was presented, including the financials, because I was being supported by my family and my parents for that. So there's a bit of a technical aspect to that, and that was presented well, and the visa basically came. And honestly, in the same day that I got my visa, I had to take a flight because I got my visa on a Friday and had to be in New Zealand on Monday to attend my class. And so it basically, and I did not have any idea how far New Zealand was at that point of time, honestly, and that there was no direct flight. And then I had to fly through Korea, come into Auckland, and from Auckland into Christchurch, and land here eventually. Yeah, so
Yeah.
again, a piece of resilience there in that last few hours from booking my tickets to getting on a flight and navigating my way to the bottom of the world through few other countries.
When you got to New Zealand, was there a support network, support system? What about mentorship? Was that something that helped you, do you think?
So I took some proactive steps. After visiting the New Zealand fair, that seminar that my friend introduced me to the gentleman who had invited me to, something in me got more inquisitive about New Zealand and about certain universities, including University of Canterbury that I met on that day. And I jumped onto the University of Canterbury's website and I did some research. And from there on, I landed on a page where some of their former students talking about their experiences. I was like, okay, this is really interesting. So I jumped onto LinkedIn and I actually looked up University of Canterbury, and then I found few people who were currently studying at the university in the program that I wanted to go for, which is the Masters of Business Management. And I reached out to someone called Henry Bersani, who's my very good friend till date. And I wrote to him and I said, hey, I'm a student from India, and I'm looking to come to New Zealand for this program. And what do you think? And Henry came back quite quickly and gave me his honest opinion and feedback about what are the good, what would be the challenges, what should we really be prepared with. And so he became my friend, my philosopher, my guide for that period. And we kept in touch. And while things were moving smoothly on the other end with admissions and immigration, I was getting familiar with what to expect in New Zealand, the New Zealand way of life, how things work over here. I had questions, I would inquire, he would reply back to me. And that gave me a sense of, or drew a picture of what this place could be like. And of course, there were people in universities that I was in touch with, and I developed a good working relations with them even before landing. One of the things about stuff that we spoke about, strength leads to opportunity. I knew that I love engaging with people. I love talking to people. I love forming and forging those relationships because I don't tend to just keep in touch with people while we have something to discuss or a common, it's like basically transaction versus relationship. I kept in touch with these people because I was really interested in what they were doing in New Zealand, in Christchurch, even if things didn't work out.
Yeah.
And about the earthquake, how did you get through those things? And while that was happening in that process, I just learned so much. And these people, these 2 or 3 people became my guiding mentors, friends for my initial period in New Zealand, which set me up.
How do you think an organization could build something similar to this? Because I think what you're talking here is, the individual making efforts to build a network, to find mentors, which I know is one of the most difficult things to do. In an organizational level, you've actually got the opportunity sitting right in front of you where you could potentially create internal networks where colleagues are supporting each other, and particularly with the earthquakes in Christchurch, I know that a lot of organizations, the barrier or the hierarchy of your colleagues kind of dropped because everyone needed to help each other. And it was quite an amazing moment because you had good C-suite, I should say, really helping and supporting their colleagues who were mid-management, interns, everyone, right? And that might have been lost a little bit because obviously, those sorts of events can influence that initiative. So today, what's your recommendations on an organization really trying to encourage those internal networks and maybe even internal mentorship? What's wrong with, say, a senior leader mentoring a junior staff member? That could be valuable.
I feel and I'm drawing my experience from now being in the industry of education for a long time, having been in mid-managerial to senior leadership roles. I feel that the ultimate beneficiaries should be incentivizing their people. And what I mean by that is that, say, a university, if they're getting international students, they are getting the international tuition fee along with that. They are the ultimate beneficiary. I being proactive, reaching out to people, because that's part of who I am. I like. Not everyone is that proactive, or they're not that, social, or they hesitate to reach out to people. Um, um, I got the benefit through that. But if all right, so I just want to dial back and maybe say it differently. Organizations who are the ultimate beneficiary are going out to seek more clients. Say a university goes out to international markets, and one of the ways they do that is by incentivizing the customer, which is giving them scholarship, which is basically a discount on tuition fee. And let's say an organization's leader decides that to get more customers, we need to give a discount of my product is for 40,000, I give a discount of 5,000. In a university's setup, this would mean that you have a tuition fee and we give you a scholarship or discount of 5,000. Now you pay us 35,000. That's your incentive to come to us. How about we take that incentive and break it down and look at what does my customer success look like if this was translated into more tangible than just financial discount. Um, Divide it into incentivizing person like my friend Henry Basani, who gave his own time to help New Zealand, the university, um, and me, giving those advice, being my friend, my guide, and eventually helping. If these people, if the team is incentivized to do what they are good at, it doesn't feel like you're doing voluntary work. Your company, you're doing an amazing job. Just imagine, out of that $5,000 that I was going to give to the student, I'm only going to give that student $1,000 as cash discount. The remaining the remaining money will be distributed in various ways. $1,000 will be given to Ollie to accommodate my international students for internship, and that's my acknowledgement to you as a business for the space and the resources that you'll spend to have that student. Eventually, your business will also get benefit from them, but I'm now incentivizing you rather than putting this, obligation sort of a thing. What does a student or someone new arriving into the country really need in the first 2 weeks? A safe and a warm place to stay. I'm going to use $1,000 to pay for the person's accommodation. I'm going to use $500 for the person's or the student's grocery. So if you've got in the same amount of pool of money, if you are incentivizing the person to set them up for success rather than one off discount to get them in, I think that's the best thing that leaders can do today to empower their team. It's long existed as a mechanism of driving and boosting sales, connecting to incentivizing how much sale you make. That's a different. But if you empower your staff and incentivize them to help people, which they anyways doing it'll lead to more impact. I don't know if I've explained it well.
Well, it's funny because I interviewed Sonali at University of Canterbury, who is business continuity emergency management leader over there, and her answer to the same question was very similar, which makes me think maybe it's a UC cultural thing there as well. But I totally agree. I think it is, you can't just ask people, you need to explain to them why you want to build those networks and those systems and what they can get out of it, and explain why you're, as you say, you're breaking down, for example, the payment structure here, letting them know why it's been done that way so they can visualize the strategy. So yeah, great answer. We're almost out of time today. I like to round up these podcasts with 2 questions, and I ask these to all of our guests. The first one is, if a listener could do just one thing today that makes them 1% more resilient, what would that be?
Focus on your strength and never ever lose your sense of humor when you are in these times of distress. I've never lost it. Yes, I've had those frustrating time when my visas didn't work out and some other hurdles came up. But at the end of the day, I would go out and have a good laugh with my friends and get prepared next day to fight my battle.
That's a fantastic answer. I love that. And the second question is, and this is going to be a bit difficult for you actually, what's the one book you would recommend?
Apart from Good on You, Mate.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't have any great advice in terms of like a life-changing book or stuff. I could recommend so many other biographies and memoirs and stuff, but in my own funny way, there's one book that has influenced me quite a bit, and it's not a business leadership sort of a book, but it's more of, I think it's like a creative nonfiction what I've written, and the book was written by the book is called Shantaram, and was written by Gregory David Roberts. It's a story of a person who, in various circumstances, left, came to India. That's what the book is. A fugitive from Australia comes to us, New Zealand on a forged passport, and from here goes to Bombay. I'm not saying that's my journey, but in between everything, Shantaram is a great read. It's a philosophy. It's a fictional book, basically, and I love it. It's a great novel.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just there are a lot of aspects to it that I like. So I'd say it's a good read. Don't think of any learning out of it. It's a great novel. I like it.
Yeah, great.
And especially because I had it in my hand when I was coming to New Zealand and read it on my flight. So that's very relatable to the podcast we're doing.
Yeah. So Good on You, Mate. Where can people buy this at the moment? Because it's only just launched. Only launched yesterday as of doing this podcast. So where's the best place to get a copy?
So it's all available on all major digital platforms, including Amazon. So it's on Kindle.
Great.
It's on Apple. It's basically now live in 20 countries on various digital platforms. So you can get the ebook on any platform where you go to buy your ebooks. Print on demand will be available on the same platform very soon, in a week's time. And we'll have a couple of bookstores here in Christchurch, which will be having my books there. And for more information, people can keep an eye on my Instagram handle. It's called goodonyouMate_NZ. And I'm active on LinkedIn by the same name. My page is Good on You Mate on LinkedIn as well.
Great. We'll share all the links in the footnotes to all your socials and where people can get a copy. So, Sandeep, thanks so much for your time. I think one thing to sort of round up this podcast with is you've been influential in my own work, and your tenacity and your influence in Christchurch is really inspiring, because this city has been through a lot, and it is the community that is the most important thing. It's the people. And after meeting you, I found that you embody that spirit in what you're doing and how you're helping not just students, but the professionals around you. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that, but also to thank you personally for what you've done for me and our team. I'm very excited for you in this book, because as I said at the start, it's not an easy task to do such a thing. And then you've now got this journey you're about to go on to promote it, which some people say is where the real work begins. So best of luck with that. And again, thank you so much for your time, Sandeep.
Thanks, Ollie, for having me. I really appreciate all the kind words that you've said, and you're doing some amazing work with your podcast, The Unbreakable Venture. And I'm really grateful that you saw the parallels of the work that you do in emergency management systems and resilience in my story. And that just shows that sometimes we've got these stories that we tell, which might have far-reaching impacts in areas that you are not even aware of that it will have. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks. That's it for today's update. If you need help navigating these threats or building a plan to protect your business, the same advisors who collate these insights are here to help. Head over to unbreakableventures.com to book a complimentary chat online with one of them. And if you found this resource useful, consider subscribing to Unbreakable Ventures or sharing the article with your network. After all,
resilience is about community and communication. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay safe.
Unbreakable Ventures is brought to you by the Senior Advisory Team at Fixing, a boutique resilience advisory based in the Oceania, ASEAN and India regions. Special thanks to our sponsor and Europe's leading SaaS provider for resilience software, F24. Our resources are researched and published by industry specialists across New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia and the UK. This podcast provides advice and opinion on disaster recovery and the threat landscape. The content is not a substitute for expert guidance during a crisis. Unbreakable Ventures is trademarked by Fixing Consulting Partners, a Fixing Group company.